So now, some of you have tea. I also have tea. The rest of you who have not got tea, just imagine you have got your tea. The qualities of Buddhas are inconceivable, the qualities of Dharma are inconceivable, the qualities of Sangha are inconceivable, and offer this tea to the ones who are inconceivable. Does everyone have the text with the book with three different texts and several languages?
You from Thailand or Burma? Thailand. Okay. Okay. Oh.
No. Diabloch. So today we're going to go through a commentary on the awakening mind, Bodhichitta Vivarana by Master Nagarjuna. He was known as the Master Nagarjuna was known as the second Buddha of this teaching of the Buddha. So not only should we go by the historical renown of Master Nagarjuna, but we could actually have the evidence of his scholarship of Buddhism from his writings. So he was an incomparable master, the second Buddha of this particular teaching of the Buddha. So he's writing a commentary on the awakening mind on page 107. Please turn to it. He also practiced Tantra, secret mantrayana, mainly focusing his practice on Guhya Samaja Tantra, the secret communion. And he has written sadhana for practice called Dorje. And then he also wrote Dose, which combines his commentary with the sources from the root Guhya Samaja root Tantra. And then his follower of Master Chandrakirti also wrote the bright lamp on the Guhya Samaja Tantra. And Master Nagarjuna also has written other texts on Tantra. And with regard to the completion stage practice of Guhya Samaja Tantra, he wrote the 5 stages. And Aryadeva wrote a commentary to that, which is called Judu, Compendium of Practices. And so these were the tantric texts written by Indian masters Nagarjuna and his disciples and followers. And so, with regard to the spread of Buddhism in Tibet, there are 2 phases. One is called the earlier phase, and then there is the later phase. The earlier phase teaching refers to the spread of the Nyingma tradition. And then from Lotsawa Rinchen Sangpo's time, the great Tibetan translator, Rinchen Sangpo's time, the spread of Buddhism in Tibet is known as later dissemination. And so we have the old or ancient school and the new school. in the new school of this dissemination, in this new school, we have the Tantra mainly focusing on the Guhyasamaja Tantra. And then in Tantra, in the old school, Nyingma tradition, there are many different Tantras. As I mentioned yesterday briefly, in the Kagyu and Nyingma traditions, it seems they are related, their teachings are related to the third sermon of the Buddha. In the Sakya tradition, in the Nyingma tradition, there is the Kadak and Lundup, the primordial purity and spontaneous awareness. And then the term that they use in their practice is Riktong Sungjuk, which is the union of awareness and emptiness. And so it seems these teachings are the second turning and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma of the Buddha. And then in the Sarma tradition, the new school tradition, there is the Sakya tradition where they talk about the union of clarity or luminosity and emptiness. Luminosity referring to the nature of the mind, the definition or the nature, and then emptiness referring to the nature, the essence of the mind. And so in the Nalanda tradition, which we follow in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we don't resort only to scriptural authority, but we use logical reasoning mainly. Emphasis is on logical reasoning to demonstrate the truth of the teaching of the Buddha. So maybe it's maybe too much for me to say, but usually vision that regarding the story, I doubt about the story that the Master Nagarjuna brought the perfection of wisdom teachings from the land of the Nagas. And with regard to Master Vasubandhu's, ये थोड़ा मेरे लिए बहुत बड़ा है, ये साउंड ज़्यादा बड़ा है मेरे लिए. So Vasubandhu, the evolution of the universe according to the ancient Indian tradition, which I have a reservation about, which is in the third chapter of his Abhidharma Kosha Karika. And so with regard to, in which there is mention of the Mount Sumeru in the center of the universe, and then the four continents to the four directions, four cardinal directions. So I doubt about that existence of Mount Meru. But in any case, since a long time ago, I have been saying that the Buddha had not come to the world to measure the earth. And so he has not come to make a map of the world or anything like that. But in any case, although there is a story which relates that the perfection of wisdom teachings were brought from the land of the Nagas by Master Nagarjuna, it may be just that that was what had come down to us in legendary way. So I have one. Battery Zorot. So I've once heard that there was some discovery of Paramita, Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, somewhere in India, which was an old text. So in any case, we have the teaching of the Buddha pertaining to the Four Noble Truths and the 16 characteristics or aspects, and the 37 Bodhipattanga, or these 37 factors of enlightenment. And then, apart from the first two turnings of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha taught the true cessation and true path and so forth, which are the main teachings, then he turned the third wheel of Dharma, where he taught that of the which teaches that of the Buddha nature, particularly referring to the clear light or the luminous nature of the mind. And then after the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, after these three turnings of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha also gave, apart from these, the Buddha also gave the tantric teachings. And in the tantra system, in Nyingma tradition particularly, they divide the tantras into the outer and inner tantras. Outer tantras referring to those of the Kriya Upa Yoga tantras, and then the inner tantras referring to Mahanuati Yoga. And in other words, the Nyingma tradition presents what are known as 9 vehicles. And so we can understand the teachings of the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma as a systematic build-up to that of the system to build up to the highest yoga tantra. So in a commentary on the awakening mind, it says, so the first verse that is found in the text, it says, it has been stated, devoid of all realities, true to it is in the nature of emptiness. That is said to be a quotation from the Guya Samaja Tantra, one of the chapters. So, of the two types of bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, this text particularly emphasizes that of the ultimate bodhicitta, and the other one is that of the conventional bodhicitta. So, having taught about the ultimate bodhicitta, which is the understanding, direct understanding of emptiness, and then in order for that wisdom of an ultimate reality, ultimate truth, to lead us to Buddhahood, we need to combine it with that of bodhicitta, which is the conventional bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment. And therefore, the spirit of enlightenment is taught later in the text. So, homage to glorious Vajras, in Sanskrit, Bodhicitta Vivarana, in Tibetan, Changjusam Gidelpa, and homage, which is translated as a commentary on the awakening mind. Homage to glorious Vajrasattva. It has been stated, devoid of all real entities, utterly discarding all objects and subjects, such as aggregates, elements, and sense fields. Due to the sameness of self-essence of all phenomena, one's mind is primarily unborn. It is in the nature of emptiness. And then the next two paragraphs. And then the first verse on page 108 says, bowing to the glorious Vajra holder who embodies the awakening mind, I shall explain here the meditative practice of awakening mind that destroys cyclic existence. Is a plural term, nam, not holding, but it should be holding. So just as the blessed Buddhas, we go back to 107, just as the blessed Buddhas and the great Bodhisattvas have generated the mind of great awakening, I too shall from now until I arrive at the heart of awakening, generate the awakening mind, in order that I may save those who are not saved, free those who are not freed, relieve those who are not relieved, and help thoroughly transcend sorrow those who have not thoroughly transcended sorrow. Those bodhisattvas who practice by means of this sacred mantra, after having generated awakening mind in terms of its conventional aspects in the form of aspiration, must then produce the ultimate awakening mind through the force of meditative practice. I shall therefore explain its nature. So for the wisdom realizing emptiness or selflessness to become a true cause for Buddhahood, one needs to combine it with Bodhichitta. And Bodhichitta, or spirit of enlightenment, is that which is focused on Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, to wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in order to generate and cultivate Bodhicitta, this spirit of enlightenment, one needs to precede it with the cultivation of great compassion. So Master Chandrakirti in his Madhyamaka Avatara, right in the beginning of the text, pays homage to great compassion. So he says that great compassion is the most important thing in the beginning of a bodhisattva path, before entering it, and having entered the bodhisattva path, it is also important. And then at the end too, when one becomes enlightened, a Buddha, it is also important, as the Buddhas have cultivated bodhicitta for eons, over eons and eons, and they are more or less propelled by or moved by great compassion for the benefit of all sentient beings, directly or indirectly, to help them. Therefore, they are moved. Therefore, Buddhas perform their deeds of enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings, moved by compassion. And therefore, in the beginning, it is the great compassion is important, like that of a seed, and in the middle, like a manure and water and so forth, to for its further growth, and then in the end, it is like that of the harvest. Therefore, this great compassion is important in the beginning, middle, and end of a bodhisattva path. And so the Buddhas are moved by their compassion to dispel and overcome the suffering of sentient beings, because the suffering of sentient beings are rooted in ignorance, that of misconception of reality. So because this misconception is a distorted view, we have the counteracting factors for it, just as other destructive emotions like those of anger or attachment could also be countered by other practices, but because they're finally rooted in misconception of reality, ignorance. So those afflictive emotions, which are not a view, can be overcome through other practices, whereas their own particular counter factors, whereas those afflictive emotions, which are of view, distorted view, they must be overcome through understanding the reality of things as it is. And so the afflicted intelligence is more difficult to overcome. And therefore, Master Nagarjuna, at the end of his fundamental wisdom verses of the middle way, says that the Buddha was moved by his compassion, and therefore he taught the sacred Dharma to rid us of all distorted views. So how do we overcome this misconception of reality? And that is done by understanding that of the interdependent nature of things, as Master Nagarjuna writes in the beginning of his fundamental wisdom verses of the middle way, where he pays homage to the Buddha, teaching dependent origination free from the 8 extremes. And so these 8 extremes, such as cessation, birth, and so forth, do not exist in its ultimate sense, within the objects. So what this means is that things arise through causes and conditions and through other factors. Although there are certain schools of thought within the non-Buddhist schools of thought in India, classical, such as Charvakas, who reject any kind of causality, but things do arise through their causes and conditions. For example, if you take this flower in front of the stage, I mean, these flowers have their own seeds, particular seeds, which from which they have grown. And with regard to our face, for example, the modern scientists are able to actually describe and explain that even as kids, within the DNA, and then chromosome and DNA, they see the blueprints for the different shapes of our face and the number of hairs on our head and so forth. So, therefore, the Sankhya school of thoughts of ancient India are not to be blamed, who say that, for saying that the results of things are actually in the seeds, in their seeds. And so, therefore, they say that the result and the cause are of the same nature. And they actually assert that things arise from self. But, and then there are other schools which say that things arise from independently existing others. If that were the case, then Master Chandrakirti says, even a bright fire could give rise to darkness, and that's not possible. So when we say arising from other, it's not just other per se, but it is talking about other in the sense that the things existing as other, independently of other factors. And so we reject this production from self and production from other. And therefore, we can also reject the production from both or neither. And so Mula Madhyamaka Karika of Master Nagarjuna actually uses reasoning to reject or disprove the production from self, other, both, or neither. We need the Hindi translation, so. So perhaps I'll read through the book, because we all have the book. So in the beginning of this book, there is the supplication to the 17 masters of Nalanda Monastic University of ancient India. The first verse is homage to the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha. Amongst all different founding teachers of the different religious traditions, Buddha's teaching becomes unique in the sense that it has its own unique philosophical position and explanation. Therefore, he is called the unparalleled speaker. And then verse number 2 is homage to Master Nagarjuna, who has commented on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras by using the reasoning of dependent origination and explicated the teaching of the Perfection of Wisdom. And he became the trailblazer of the Madhyamaka, or the middle way philosophical school. And then next is a homage to his chief disciple, Aryadeva. And then the next verse is homage to Master Buddhapalita in Tibetan Sangye-kyang. So if you study his commentary on Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka Karika, which is called Buddhapalita, you'll see the unique position that he has actually set of the Prasangika school of thought. And then next comes homage to Master Bhava Viveka. So he was a student of Master Nagarjuna, and he asserted that things have some objective existence. So just as they appear to us, the things do exist in that way, objectively. And then, because of that, there is a distinction between within the conventional reality or truth. They make the division of the correct and the incorrect or false conventional truth. So he makes that division. And then next comes Master Chandra Kirti, homage to Master Chandra Kirti. So based on the understanding of mere conditionality of things, that is the term that he uses, mere conditionality, he clears the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism on the basis of understanding the reality and the apparent appearance in reality. So Madhyamaka system, and he also explicated the entire teaching of the sutras and tantras. comprising both the extensive and the profound teachings of the Buddha. So homage to Master Chandrakirti. And then next comes homage to Master Shantideva. So who's writing? Although bodhicitta is something that is touched in Master Nagarjuna's texts, such as the Ratnavali and his Bodhicitta Vivarana and so forth, and then in the 400 verses of Aryadeva too, there is teaching on bodhicitta, but the most profound and extensive teaching on bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, is given in Master Shantideva's Bodhisattvacharya Avatara, the way of the Bodhisattva, or a guide to the way of Bodhisattvas. And so there has not been a text on bodhicitta as profound as this one in the past, and it's unprecedented, and there may not be one like this in the future as well. And so I have some interest in bodhicitta in my childhood, but I had found it very difficult, and I expressed this to my tutor at that time, Tata Rinpoche, and Tata Rinpoche actually said that you should not feel discouraged to cultivate bodhicitta, and he even confided to me that he has the experience of bodhicitta. And then after coming into exile, I received the teaching on the Shantideva's text, A Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, and since then there's the spirit of enlightenment, bodhicitta, I've been feeling closer. And so I can say that I have some experience, which comes when I put effort, although I do not have effortless bodhicitta yet. And so this is based on, this has come about based on Shantideva's text. So why I wrote the praise to the prayer to the 17 Nalanda Masters was, of course, we had in the past a praise to 8 different Indian masters of the Nalanda tradition, but we have other masters whose texts, classical texts, we study as part of our philosophical and logical pursuit or study, and therefore I added some of these 9 different masters on top of the 8 that were already praised earlier. And then next comes prayer to Master Shantrakshita, who was we are very grateful to him, because it was him who established the tradition of Nalanda, the Nalanda tradition of study of Buddhist philosophy through logic. And so, thanks to him, this tradition of using logic to study Buddhist philosophy, cosmology, and so forth exists. Thanks to him, and that exists only in the Tibetan tradition. And then next comes homage to Master Kamalashila, who wrote his text called The Stages of Meditation. And then after Kamalashila comes homage to Master Asanga, who was the founder of the Chittamatra, or the mind-only school of Buddhism. And after him comes Master Vasubandhu, his younger brother, who was a master of Abhidharma and so forth. And then comes his disciple, Master Dignaga, who was a great master of logic. And after Dignaga comes praise to Master Dharmakirti, another master of logic. So Master Dignaga, who was a follower of Dignaga's tradition of logic and epistemology. And after the Dharmakirti comes Vimuktisena. So Vimuktisena was, though he was a disciple of Vasubandhu, who was praised earlier, he actually explained and commented on the Prajnaparamita, Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, unlike his own master. He actually interpreted it from the Madhyamaka, middle-way point of school point of view. And then next comes Haribhadra, praise to Haribhadra, who was a renowned master of commentator of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And many of the schools of philosophy within the Tibetan tradition, monastic tradition, there are many who actually memorize his text called Clear Meaning. So some years ago, I met some nuns from Nepal in Dharamsala, and many of these nuns have actually memorized this text, and I told them, you are greater than me in having been able to memorize this foot to earth commentary by Haribhadra. And then after Vimuktisena comes praise to Gunaprabha and Shakyaprabha next, and who were the masters of monastic code of discipline. And finally comes a praise to Master Atisha Divankara Shtijana. So having praised and prayed to the 17 Nalanda Masters, then His Holiness goes on to say, may my mind stream be matured and liberated through this prayer and with undivided faith in the teaching and the writings of these great masters, who are like the ornaments of the world. Scholars who are like the ornaments of the world. And then the next verse is about understanding the true truths, based on which to understand the Four Noble Truths, and thereby developing this firm faith in the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, based on reasoning, so that one is able to plant the seed of liberation firmly in one's mind stream. And then the prayer to be able to cultivate bodhicitta, genuine bodhicitta, spirit of enlightenment, based on this unwavering compassion. And having studied and understood the writings of these great masters, then may I be able to tread or go through the process of study, reflection, and meditation on the perfection of wisdom path, as well as the Vajrayana path, to gain certainty in these paths. And then it goes on to with other prayers. So it's very important. In the colophon, His Holiness has written that it's very important for us to develop this speculation called a curiosity, and not just accept things as somebody says. When somebody says something, not just accept them, but to actually investigate into the reality or the them, to find the reality and truth for yourself through reasoning. So that one is able to develop the wisdom based on understanding and reason. And this prayer was written at the request of, on top of having this wish to write some prayer to the 17 Nalanda Masters, I was also requested by Trishik Rinpoche, the late Trishik Rinpoche, who was one of His Holiness' teachers, requested to write it, and therefore I've written it. On the 15th of December 2001 in Dharamshala, the Tekshin Shelling area of Dharamshala in Kangra district, Himachal Pradesh, India. So it was written in the 2545th year since the Buddha's passing away, according to the Theravada tradition, and it was written in the 17th Rabjung cycle of the Tibetan calendar in the year of iron snake, first of the 11th month. So we have this great monastic, the Nalanda tradition of Buddhism, which is based on reason and logic. If we follow only on the basis of faith, it may not survive for long. But if we follow the teaching of the Nalanda tradition based on reason and logic, it may continue, survive for some more centuries. So in the West, there are people who are intelligent, scholars, learned, and also scientists who really admire this Nalanda tradition. And therefore, we must develop this understanding of the teaching of the Buddha based on reason and logic, not just faith, and which I has emphasized yesterday also. So you should not just be satisfied with rituals and prayers that are done in different homes by some monks or pujaris, but one should actually try to understand the teaching of the Buddha based on insight into the two truths, conventional and ultimate, on the basis of which you should develop the understanding of the Four Noble Truths and so forth. So we go through the text now, a commentary. In Sanskrit, the title is Bodhichitta Vivarana, in Tibetan, Chandrasam Gidaba, homage to glorious Vajrasattva, devoid of all realities, utterly discarding all objects and subjects. So in the non-Buddhist traditions of India, they believe in an Atma or a soul, which is permanent, which is believed to be permanent, unchanging, which comes from the previous life to this life and goes from here to the next life, which is separate from our body and mind constituent factors. And so the first line, devoid of all realities, is a rejection of such an independent self or soul, and utterly discarding all objects and subjects is a rejection of the assertion that things arise or are made up of indivisible particles and so forth, such as aggregates, elements, and sense fields. Due to sameness of selflessness of all phenomena, one's mind is primordially unborn. It is the nature of emptiness. So in the Chittamatra philosophy, they believe that there's no external things that exist, but only mind is real. And so that is rejected in this verse as well. So having quoted these lines from the Gwe Samaja Root Tantra, We move on to the second verse, as is already commented on the first verse and then the two paragraphs before that. The Buddhas maintained the awakening mind to be not obscured by such conceptions as consciousness of self, aggregates, and so on. It is always characterized by emptiness. So, what Master Nagarjuna is saying is by having rejected or refuted the positions of the realists, Buddhist realists, who he will actually demonstrate the position of Madhyamakas. And it is with the mind moistened by compassion that you must cultivate awakening with mind, with effort. The Buddhas who embody great compassion constantly develop this awakening mind. The self postulated with the extremists, when you thoroughly analyze it with reasoning, within all the aggregates of body and mind, nowhere can you find a locus for this. Aggregates exist but are not permanent. They do not have nature of selfhood. A permanent and an impermanent cannot exist as the support and the supported. So what this refers to, the verse number 5 on page 109 refers to, is there cannot be a permanent self within impermanent body and mind as such. If the so-called self does not exist, how can the so-called agent be permanent? If there were things, then one could investigate the attributes in the world. Since a permanent cannot function to cause, in gradual instance terms, so both without and within, no such permanent entity exists. So if there is a permanent, unchanging self, we cannot posit old and young people. When we say such and such person is young or old, we actually posit that on the basis of their aggregates as well, their body and mind. If it were potent, why would it be dependent? So, so up to verse number 8, the text refutes those of the non-Buddhist positions. And from verse 9 down, it actually deals with the Buddhist realists. If it were an entity, it would not be permanent, for entities are always momentary. And if, with respect to impermanent entities, agency has not been negated. This would be void of this world, devoid of self, and so on, is utterly vanquished by the notions of aggregates, elements, and sense fields, and that of object and subject. Verse number 18. Verse number 19. Verse number 21 and 22. So these deal with the Chittamatra, or the mind-only school's position. So in the Chittamatra philosophy, they say that things do not have any external existence, but real mind is real, mind or consciousness is real. It is similar to the quantum physicists saying that as long as there is an observer, there is an observed object. Without the observer, you cannot talk about an observed object as such. And so this, because of that, it's very similar to Chittamatra philosophy. So, of course, things like matter do have special extension, but when you actually search for the identity of things, external objects and so forth, you cannot pinpoint anything as being this or that, finally. And so the Chittamatras say, because of that, they say that things have no external existence, that there is no indivisible particle and so forth. Verse number 23. So verse number 20, one says it's the sameness of the object that functions, as if asserted, it is it not like being harmed in a dream? So his Holiness was commenting on these verse. And then next, verse number 22, in terms of object and subjects, whatever appears to the consciousness, apart from the cognitions themselves, no external objects exist anywhere. So Chittamatra view. So there are no external objects at all existing in the mode of entities. The very perception of individual consciousness arises appearances of the forms. Just as a person whose mind is deluded sees magical illusions and mirages and the cities of Gandharva spirits, so too forms and so on are perceived. To overcome grasping at selfhood, the Buddha taught aggregates, elements, and so on. By abiding in the states of mind only, the beings of great fortune even renounced that teaching. For those who have propound consciousness only, this manifold world is established as mind only. What might be the nature of that consciousness? I shall explain this very point. So in the Chittamatra view, they actually make three categories of phenomena, and they divide the phenomena into three categories, which are called the imputed nature, which is said to have no independent objective existence of its in and of themselves, whereas the dependent nature and the perfect nature do have objective existence. All of this is but one's mind. Verse number 27. That which was stated by the able one, the Buddha, is to alleviate the fear of the childish. It is not a statement of final truth. The imputed, the dependent, and the consummate, they have only one nature of their own, emptiness. Their identities are constructed upon the mind. So the Chittamatras asserting that the mind is real and independently existent or truly existent, that too, when you actually search for the identity of the mind itself, cannot be found when you check into its previous and later moments. Since the mind has no special existence, extension as such, we can talk about the mind in terms of momentary series of moments. So to those who delight in the great vehicle, the Buddha taught in brief selflessness in perfect equanimity, and that is the mind. That mind is primarily unborn. And the Chittamatras propound what are known as 8 different consciousnesses, the 5 sensory and the 6th mind, and then on top of that they also assert Alaya Vijnana, which is the foundational consciousness and or the mind basis of all, and that of the afflicted mind. So the proponents of yogic practices assert that the purified mind are affected through mastery of one's own mind, and through utter evolution of its state is the sphere of its own reflexive awareness. That which is past is no more. That which is yet to be is not obtained. As it abides, its locus is utterly transformed. So how can there be such awareness in the present? So this text goes through the different positions of non-Buddhist traditions, and then the Chittamatra, the realists, and then the Chittamatras. So dealing with these and refuting their positions. Holiness. So verse number 37 and 38. So finally, when you actually search for the identity of things, what you find is that they are merely designated, though they do not have any independent objective existence at all. But because of conventions, we still can deal with things in the world, in a day-to-day life. In brief, verse number 43, in brief, the Buddhas have never seen, nor will they ever see such a mind. So how can they see it as intrinsic nature, that which is devoid of intrinsic nature? Entity is a conceptualization. Absence of conceptualization is emptiness. Where conceptualization occurs, how can there be emptiness? The mind, in terms of the perceived and the perceiver, is the Tathagatas. This the Tathagatas have never seen. Where there is the perceived and the perceiver, there is no enlightenment. Devoid of characteristics and origination, devoid of substantive reality and transcending speech, space, awakening mind, and enlightenment possess the characteristics of non-duality. Those abiding in the heart of enlightenment, such as the Buddhas, the great beings, and all the great compassionate ones, always understand emptiness to be like space. Therefore, constantly meditate on this emptiness, the basis of all phenomena, tranquil and illusion-like, groundless and destroyer of cyclic existence. As non-origination and as emptiness, and as no self, grasping at emptiness as such, he who meditates on a lesser truth, that is not true meditation. The notions of the virtue and non-virtue, characterized by being momentary and disintegrated, the Buddha has spoken of their emptiness. Other than this, no emptiness is held. So when we talk about something like space and so forth, they should be understood as existing merely by way of convention. So as the Pramana Vartika by the Dharmakirti says, that things have their own distinct identity, but this is according to those who assert some kind of independent or objective existence in things, whereas the Prasangikas do not assert such a thing, and therefore, when you actually search for things in and of themselves, you cannot find anything that you can pinpoint as being this or that. So we have this notion that things do have some existence from their own side, but if you actually look for that, what appears to you, if you believe that to be so, then when you actually try to dissect it and try to find its real identity, you will not be able to pinpoint anything as being this or that object. And therefore, there is nothing which exists objectively, but things exist by way of convention or designation. So verse number 54, in brief, if the Buddhas uphold the mind to be impermanent, Impermanence means that things are exist moment by moment. When you actually look at a moment, what you see actually is half of it is gone, half of it is yet to come, as the 400 verses of Aryadeva says. Even a moment cannot be actually pinpointed. Whereas we usually have the belief that things have some kind of objective existence, but when you search for them, you do not find it. How would they not uphold that it is empty as well? From the very beginning itself, the mind never had any intrinsic nature. It is not being stated here that an entity which possesses intrinsic existence somehow lacks this. If one asserts this, one abandons the locus of selfhood in the mind. It's not the nature of things to transcend one's own intrinsic nature. Just as sweetness is the nature of molasses and heat the nature of fire, likewise we maintain that nature of all phenomena is emptiness. And so the meaning of emptiness should be understood as being dependently originated, as Master Nagarjuna himself says in the fundamental wisdom verses of the Middle Way, where he says, what is dependently originated is said to be empty, and that is designated. That is a designated, and that is the middle way. So when we say things are empty, we don't merely say that things cannot be found when you actually search for their identity. That's not the final meaning of emptiness, but that things cannot be found when you search for them because they are dependently originated. And so, dependent origination means dependence means that things have no objective independent existence, and origination means that they are not non-existent. So the mere word dependent origination is able to dispel both the extremes of nihilism and eternalism or permanence. So John Lama Rinpoche, in his commentary on Master Tsongkhapa's text called In Praise of the Buddha for Teaching Dependent Origination, says that by dependence, what is rejected is that things have no independent existence, whereas by the word origination, the worldly affairs, things that work in the world by convention is not rejected. So we should understand, even in case of one object, that it is dependently originated, meaning that it has no independent existence, yet it exists by way of convention. When one speaks of emptiness as the nature of phenomena, one in no sense propounds nihilism. By the same token, one does not propound eternalism either, starting with ignorance and ending with aging. All processes that arise from the 12 links of dependent origination, we accept them to be like a dream and like an illusion. This wheel with 12 links rolls along the road of cyclic existence. Outside this, there cannot be sentient beings experiencing the fruits of their deeds. Just as in dependence upon a mirror, a full image of one's face appears, this face not move onto the mirror, yet without it, there is no image of the face. Likewise, aggregates recompose in a new existence, yet the wise always understand that no one is born in another existence, nor does someone transfer to such existence. In brief, from empty phenomena arise, agent, karma, fruits, and their enjoyer. The conqueror taught these to be only conventional, just as the sound of a drum as well as shoot are produced from a collection of factors. We accept the external world of dependent origination to be like a dream and an illusion. So that phenomena are born from causes can never be inconsistent with facts. Since the cause is empty of cause, we understand it to be empty of origination. The non-origination of all phenomena is clearly taught to be emptiness. So when we talk about emptiness, we need something that we can talk about as being empty of independent existence. Without there being a basis to talk about, we cannot talk about emptiness as such. So in brief, the five aggregates are noted by the expression all phenomena. When the ultimate truth is explained as it is, the conventional is not obstructed. Independent of the conventional, no ultimate truth can be found. The conventional is taught to be emptiness. The emptiness itself is the conventional. One does not occur without the other, just as being produced and impermanent. The conventional arises from afflictions and karma arises from the mind. The mind is accumulated by the propensities. When free from propensities, it's happiness. So verse number 73 on page 122. When this emptiness is as explained is thus meditated upon by yogis, no doubt there will arise in them a sentiment attached to others' welfare. So from this verse down, the Master Nagarjuna teaches Bodhichitta. So Bodhichitta, or the spirit of enlightenment, enlightenment in Tibetan, Changchup. So it's made up of two words, Chang and Chup. Chang in the sense of purifying the negativities, defilements from within our mind with the help of antidotes. And Chup means once you have overcome all your defilements and your mind stream, the mind's nature, which is luminous and awareness, becomes manifest, and so that you are able to see everything as it is, with that nature of clarity and or luminosity and awareness becoming manifest fully. So you attain the state whereby you have overcome and purified all negativities and attained the knowledge of everything. That is what is meant by Changchup. So in one of the commentaries to Abhisamaya Alankara, there is mention of the Bodhisattvas observing sentient beings with compassion. And when they feel great compassion towards sentient beings, not only with regards to the suffering or the changeable suffering of change, but the conditional, existential, pervasive suffering, to rid all sentient beings of that kind of suffering or dissatisfactory nature. And this is actually explained through the 12 links of dependent origination, this teaching, which begins with the teaching on ignorance. And so, once you are able to stop ignorance, overcome ignorance, then the rest of the 11 other factors within this 12 links of dependent origination will also cease. And so for this to happen, we are introduced to the understanding of emptiness. So if there is a way out of suffering by overcoming that of the ignorance, which is the root of samsara, this cycle of existence, and therefore you actually develop this wisdom of emptiness, and with that wisdom the Bodhisattvas observe enlightenment or Buddhahood. So towards those beings that have bestowed benefits upon me in the past, such as through being my parents or friends, I shall strive to repay their kindness. to those beings that are being scorched by the fire of afflictions in existence prison. Just as I have given them suffering in the past, it's befitting today that I give them happiness. So, of course, we may be able to do give some benefit to others, but temporarily, but that's not the ultimate benefit that we bring to them by giving food and so forth. The fruits which are desirable or undesirable in the form of fortunate or unfortunate births in the world, they become about from helping the sentient beings or harming them. If by relying upon the sentient beings, the unexalted state of Buddhahood is brought about. So, what is so astonishing about the fact that whatever prosperities there are in the gods and the humans, such as those enjoyed by Brahma, Indra, Rudra, and the worldly guardians of the world, there is nothing in this triple world system that is not brought forth by helping others. So Master Shantideva says, what more is there need to say? Look at the difference between the sentient beings who are so selfish and remain in samsara, and those of the Buddhas who, because of their cherishing others over themselves, have become fully awakened. And so, although we do not want suffering, Master Shantideva goes on to say that though we do not want suffering, we actually we create the causes of suffering. And although we want happiness, we destroy the cause of happiness as if destroying one's own enemies. And then Master Shantideva goes on to say that unless you exchange your happiness and joy with the suffering of others, they leave alone Buddhahood, reaching Buddhahood, even in this cycle of existence, you'll not have happiness. And so, training one's mind in Bodhichitta, one could reach a point where one could feel that which intelligent person would become discouraged to ride the horse of Bodhichitta that leads one from bliss to bliss. So if you remain selfish, thinking only me, then you will always be suspicious about others, and everyone else in the world would appear as if they are your enemies and adversaries. And so, as it is said in the Guru Puja by Panchen Lobsang Chögyен, so selfishness, cherishing oneself, is the root of all misfortune, whereas cherishing others over oneself is the root of all excellent qualities. So when you are able to dedicate yourself for the benefit of all sentient beings, you will be able to actually feel determined that there's nothing else for you to do other than serving all other sentient beings. And so when you think about bodhicitta, reflect on bodhicitta, so as hell beings, as animals and hungry ghosts, the different kinds of sufferings which sentient beings experience, these come about from harming others, hunger, thirst, attacking each other, and the agony of being tormented, which are difficult to avert and unending. These are the fruits of harming others. Just as there is Buddhahood and awakening mind, and the fortunate birth on the one hand, and the unfortunate birth on the other, know that the karmic fruition of beings too is twofold. Support others with all possible factors, protect them as you would your own body. Detachment towards other sentient beings must be shunned as you would a poison. Because of their detachment did the disciples attain lesser awakening by never abandoning the sentient beings. The fully awakened Buddhas attain awakening. Thus, when one considers the occurrence of the fruits of beneficial and non-beneficial deeds, how can anyone remain even for an instant attached only to one's own welfare, rooted firmly because of compassion and arising from the shoot of awakening mind, the true awakening that is sole fruit of the altruism? This is the conqueror's children. This the conqueror's children cultivate, when through practice it becomes firm. Then, alarmed by others' suffering, the Bodhisattvas renounce the bliss of concentration and plunge into the depths of relentless hell. This is indeed amazing, praiseworthy it is. This is the excellent way of the sublime. That they give away their own flesh and wealth is not surprising at all. Those who understand this emptiness of phenomena yet also conform to the law of karma and its results. That is more amazing than amazing. This is more wondrous than wondrous. Those who wish to save sentient beings. Verse number 94. So some say that when we talk about emptiness, we're talking about nihilism. So the view of emptiness is a nihilistic view. So verse number 101 says, those who fulfill others' welfare in this way constantly through their body, speech and mind, who advocate the dialectic of emptiness, there is no dispute at all of being nihilistic. Neither in cyclic existence nor in nirvana the great beings reside. Therefore the Buddhas taught here the non-abiding nirvana. The single taste of compassion is merit. The taste of emptiness is most excellent. Those who drink the elixir of emptiness to realize self and others' welfare are conquerors' children. Bow to them with your entire being. They are always worthy of honor in the three worlds. These guides of the world reside as representatives of the Buddhas. This awakening mind is stated to be the highest ideal in the great vehicle. So with an absorbed, determined effort generates this awakening. So the great compassion, Kadamba Masters used to say that there is no greater practice than that of Bodhichitta, practicing, cultivating Bodhichitta, because it is this very factor which purifies one's negativities and which helps to accumulate merit. To accomplish self and others' welfare, no other means exist in the world. Apart from the awakening mind, to date, the Buddha saw no other means. The merit that is obtained from no mere generation of awakening mind, if it were to assume a form, it will fill more than the expanse of space. A person who is, for an instant, meditates on awakening mind, the heap of merit obtained from this, not even the conquerors can measure. A precious mind that is free of afflictions. This is the most unique and excellent jewel. It can be neither harmed nor stolen by such robbers as the Mara afflictions. Just as aspirations for the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas are unswerving, likewise those who immerse themselves in the awakening mind must hold firm their thought. Even with wonder, you should strive, as explained here in the preceding lines. Therefore, thereafter, you will yourself realize Samandabhadra's great enlightened deeds by praising the awakening mind, hailed by the excellent conquerors. The incomparable merits I have obtained today from this act made through this all sentient beings submerged in the waves of existence ocean travel on the path trodden by the leaders of the bipeds. So tomorrow we'll have a break. It's the Independence Day of India. So we'll also have holiday because it's a national holiday. And so for 2 days, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we'll have break. And then on the third day, we'll have the initiation of the great compassionate deity Avalokiteshvara or Lokeshvara. And I will also teach As preliminary to the initiation, the remaining two texts, the 8 verses of training the mind and the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas. So for today, we'll stop here. These are dedication prayers. Protect the generously, compassionately care for those who have undergone.